And we are live. Welcome, folks, to episode 3321 of the Survival Podcast. We're going to have a great discussion today. Somebody's joining us from across the pond out of rural Ireland. And I hope I don't say his name wrong. Kyle the Babikian, I think he can correct me in just a minute when I bring him on. He also is known as the Brigdgeman. And he decided to leave the city and start homesteading in a true rural environment. Did it on shoestring budget, maybe shoestrings even generous when I look at his story. And I think it's going to be very encouraging. He's here today to talk about making the move to homesteading and to, in his words, remove your excuses. Those of you that say you can't do it because you can't afford it or something like that. So we'll have him on in just a minute. Before we do, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsors of the day. Sponsor of the day number one today is Nicole Sauce with her awesome Journey to Self-Sufficiency, her Homestead Starting Pack. This is a 7-week-long webinar series with great instructors that'll teach you everything that you need to know to get started with homesteading skills, creating a successful garden, raising small livestock, victory garden poultry, beginning canning, advanced canning, curing meats, and an introduction to cheese making. And if one of those sounds like it's something you really want to do and the others aren't, you don't want to do the whole thing, you can purchase them individually. Retail on this is $4.95. But if you are or just a TSP listener, I've got everybody a discount on this one. The discount code is TSP Bacon. TSP Bacon. You get it for $200 less just by using that discount code. So check out Nicole. You guys know she's awesome. She's been part of our community for almost a decade, I guess now, and she's done a lot here to help people, and be a great place for you to give back and learn something at the same time. Next up today, JM Bullion. You know, you guys know I love Bitcoin, but I've never turned away from precious metals. I believe in stacking sats and stacking silver. JM Bullion is a great place to get your silver because they support the show you love. If you're an MSB member, they give you a discount. They have a great selection. I can talk directly to the president. They ship free. And if you're an MSB member, you get a discount. So I would just say if you're going to stack silver, why use anybody but JM Bullion? And if you, like me, you like Bitcoin and silver, they even accept Bitcoin as a form of payment to buy silver and gold with. That might be something some of you guys that are into mining would be interested in as well. And with that, let's go ahead and get our special guest on the show with us. Kyle, welcome to the Survival Podcast, man.
All right, thanks for having me. Thanks. It's I've been listening since about 2018, so it's cool to actually be on the show.
That's great to have you here, man. How bad did I do with your name?
Not so bad. I've heard worse, especially in school and things. It's not an Irish name. I'm sure people can tell.
All right, so I got close.
Yeah, and I'm a quarter Armenian, so that's where the name comes from.
Okay. Let's start off with, before we dig into like your journey out of the city, back when you were still in the city, what was like your background, your profession? Like, what did you do for a living?
So I didn't have like a standard career. Like, I was hospitality mostly. I spent like 10 years in hospitality. Like cleaning toilets, doing dishes. I was being a supervisor. I've done everything. I've worked in the kitchen. That was most of what I did. I didn't go to college or anything. I went for like a month.
You had a glamorous career, man.
Yeah. And just before coming out here, I was walking dogs. So that was like the last thing I was doing before I tapped out.
Awesome, man. So what made you decide that you wanted to leave such a glorious career and head out into the country and become a homesteader?
I don't think it's like one thing. It's kind of there's a whole bunch of different things. One being, with my glorious career, I don't think a bank would ever give me a mortgage. So going cheap was the only real option for me to ever really own something. But it's also, I've always been really into nature and animals and insects, and I've always been doing that. My mother's very good and brought us hiking in the mountains very very often. So I've always just had that affinity for being outside. And then just, learning about health, diet, I want to grow my own stuff. That came into it. The way the world is at the minute is not, it's not the way I would have it. So I'm kind of figured I'll get out and just make my own little pocket of something that suits me more.
Gotcha, man. So did you have any experience? Like, I grew up gardening, I grew up hunting, I grew up fishing. So it was kind of a natural fit to me when I got fed up with corporate America. Like, this is what I'm going to do, like go back to my roots. But I looking at your story, I get the feeling that maybe it wasn't so much the case for you.
No. When I kind of decided, I can't really pinpoint exactly when. I don't think there was like a decision moment that this is the way I want to live my life.
Uh-huh.
But it was quite recently. I'd say like 2017 maybe. I have always kind of wanted chickens because that just seems so cool. Even as a teenager, like you just get free eggs. So,
Yeah.
but no gardening. There's no gardeners in my family, not even with ornamentals. I've always had an interest in wanting to kind of live this way, but I thought that you had to be born into it. And I just grew up in the normal suburbs, just outside the capital city in Ireland. So no skills to speak of, kind of just learning from YouTube the last number of years, getting into bushcrafting and camping and spending nights out on my own. That helped me a lot. It also helped me gain a lot of confidence when you can build a fire and forage for food, those kind of things. So I was building up my skill set couple of years before I came out here. So let's say 2017, I moved here 2021. So
okay. So you've been on your piece for almost 2 years, or right around 2 years then?
2 years, 2 weweeks ago to the day.
2 years,
actually.
2 weeks, yeah. Yeah, when you're new to something like this, you keep track of anniversaries. Right? You know?
Yeah, you do, yeah.
In some ways, it is kind of like a birthday. It's like being reborn, I think, when you extract yourself from what people call normal, and then you go live a life that's what I call normal. To me, there's nothing more normal than having a part in what you eat, caring for animals, not being tethered to what modern society says you have to do and what have you.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it feels, sometimes it's very surreal feeling. You kind of, it feels like I've always been here. I feel like, and even my neighbors, I was talking to one of my neighbors there, just saying, oh yeah, it's been 2 years. And they're like, it feels like grew up here her whole life. She's never lived anywhere else except for this village. And she feels like I've been here forever as well.
Huh.
So it's really cool. But then there's also moments, like there was a moment not too long ago, I was walking outside at night. It was like middle of the night. It was dark except for this big bright moon, like reflecting off my pond. And I was just going to close up the chickens and make sure everything was all set for them. And I was like, I live here. I had to remind myself that this is actually where I live. It was just crazy weird. You get these crazy weird moments where it's like, you've been here forever, but you're also just arrived.
Yeah,
it's nice.
It is a transformation. I mean, and then as the longer it goes, the more like your prior life seems like it never happened. Dorothy and I were talking about this a couple of days ago. We lived in Pennsylvania for about almost 4 years. And it was a big time of our life. Our son was in like middle school, getting ready to go to high school. So you got all that growth. I was traveling all the time. We had a beautiful house. And sometimes we look back at that and we go like, did that even happen? Like, it's almost like it was a dream. Like, we've always been where we are in the world now. And I think that's just, maybe it's a human coping mechanism or something. Like, we retain the information, but the feeling of presence is in the current place. And it seems almost like the longer you are at a place, like this feeling, I think, will be magnified for you, at 5 years or 10 years. Like, it's crazy to me sometimes to sit here and go at the same thing you're saying. Like, we've been here 10 years, and that seems crazy. A decade has gone by since we moved into this place. And yet, on some levels, it feels like we just got here. It is kind of weird.
Yeah.
In a good way, like you're saying.
Yeah. Like, sometimes I even have to remind myself I have a family. I'm like, oh, I have I have people back home in the city.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just feels like a whole other world, or it's like it's almost like a movie. You have a memory of a movie,
Yeah.
and you can remember the scenes. And it's like but I did that, but it's kind of
Yeah.
more like a story to me now.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different person as well.
Yeah. When you're in your 50s and you look back at it, I mean,
I
look at back at my time in the Army and go, that was a hallucination. That wasn't real. There's no way I did all that crazy shit. That's not me. So you had no idea what the hell you were doing, and you took this jump, right? And I also find a lot of times going from city life, even fairly large town life, to true rural is a shock for people. Had you ever even lived in a rural environment ever before this?
No, I've never lived outside. So Dublin, if anybody doesn't know, Dublin is the capital of Ireland. So I've lived in Dublin my whole life, apart from like a little while when I was a baby. So let's say 30 years city living, city life. I grew tomatoes in a pot once, you know. That was about it. So it was kind of, it was a big move. Like Dublin's got, it's a small city in American standards, but it's like 1.5 million people, and where I live now is maybe between 250 to 500 people.
Yeah, that's a big difference. That's a massive difference. That's where you can almost know everybody by name. You can certainly know almost everybody. Like, we used to have a saying back where I grew up in rural PA. Like, so you say, "Do you know so and so?" And the person would say, "Well, I know him to see." Meaning, I don't talk to him, I don't have a relationship with him, but I know who you're talking about, right? Like, that's how you end up in a place like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I know if someone says, "Oh, do you know?" I'll just say Barry, right?
Yeah.
Do you know Barry? I say, "Oh, I don't know him. I've never met him. I've never seen him, but I know his house. I know where he lives.
I know where he lives."
You know, it's like,
yeah. There's a lot of young people out there. This is kind of their dream, and I think that they have a tendency to think, "Well, I'll go into the corporate world. I'll work. I'll make a bunch of money, and then I'll retire there." There's a lot of life in between those two times, and a lot gets wasted away in that. And it'd be better to spend that time doing what you want to do, in my opinion. What are your thoughts for young people? Like, how would you encourage them about this? And the other thing is, can you tell us how old you are? I don't want to put you on a spot or nothing, but I think.
No, you're fine. I'm 32.
32. Okay.
So I started this one just after I turned 30. So for young people, if you want to do this, if you think, I think the YouTube stuff can and like Instagram and Pinterest can kind of throw people off on this as well. They see all these other people that do what they want to do, and they subscribe to these channels that have these big, nice homesteads, big, giant like houses, and there are other people like myself that have like the smaller things going on, but you think you need to have everything set up straight away, and that's the same kind of goes for anyone buying a typical house. Like, you'll get your mortgage and you'll buy your house, and you'll set aside some of that mortgage to renovate the kitchen and the living room or whatever you want to add an ensuite or something, whatever it is, and you kind of do it all at once. And that comes from like banks giving out loans and making that possible, but that's not how things always were. Things used to be done generationally, where, like, if we go to the frontier in the States, a man would like leave his family to go out and stake a claim on some land, and he would clear trees. He would put a small plot for like a kitchen garden. He would build a log cabin, send a letter. A couple months later, the family comes. They set that up. Then his son will inherit it. He'll build bigger sheds, maybe increase the size of the cattle. Then his son gets it, and he improves the fencing and so on. Maybe even buying more land along the way. Nothing was ever all at once. That's a new phenomenon, and that's kind of where I just read a lot. I especially read a lot about how people did things in the past, here in Ireland and in other cultures and countries, and I just remind myself that that's normal. What we live in now is an anomaly. So don't be afraid to just, in my view, be normal. and work.
I call it the fiction of fiat, right? Like the only reason this exists is because we have this monetary system where they can create the money they give you based on your promise to pay it back if they think your promise is good. So when a bank gives you money, it's not even real money. It's fake money. They take printed out of nothing other than your commitment to repay.
Yeah.
And then the real property might act as collateral in the background. And it is an illusion. And it is not reality. And you mentioned like YouTube and Instagram and all that. I think another thing that hurts people that are trying to get there is the presentation of perceived perfection, right? Like they only show their best days, their best results. They spend hours worried about the lighting and the framing, and like that's not real. Like I sort of have a tremendous amount of respect for the homesteaders that do this, that are like, this is my shittiest day ever. Look, everything died. Look, something ate my chickens. Look, the coop's blown down, and I have no money to rebuild the coop or whatever it is. You know, aquaponics guy, all my fish are dead. They jumped out of the thing and died or whatever. And so much of it, and I think the place that it's even worse than homesteading is the tiny house world. Everybody's reading a book, and Instagram model with heart hands. Everything's perfection.
They read the book like this with their hand out. They're like, like who reads like that?
Or you see the one like being woken up in the morning, and it's supposed to be your boyfriend waking her up, and in the mirror you can see she's holding her own phone. Like there's so much BS, and I think it's refreshing when we do have people like, hey, it's not all easy, but it's worth doing. You're talking about how it used to be on the frontier here. I remember reading this. It was a story, but it was based on fact, and it was this family that they went out. Now they did have the guy leave, and then the family come later. They all went. And I think it was in Oklahoma during the Sooner years where you could get 40 acres just by first person to it, staked it out, you got your 40. And so they were part of that settlement movement. And the first thing they did was start digging a hole. And they built the basement before they built the house. And like mom, dad, little kids, people are just walling out buckets. And then they went to the creek and they got clay and they plastered the walls with it and they fired it. And then they built the cabin on top of the hole. And they were going to make the house bigger. But in the first season, before the winter came, they basically had a single room with a basement. That was it. That's what they had. And that way they could store food, they could hunt, and they got very little else done in that first year. And they went out like as early as they could in the year to start because they knew it. And then, you know, over time, they expanded the house and they did kind of what you said. And if you look at the opportunities, even for somebody pretty broke, and we're going to get to that in a second, because I think that you qualify as that when you went out there. Like what we can start with today, even as pretty broke, is pretty well light year ahead of that, right? That's if anybody has ever cleared a quarter of an acre with a chainsaw, the respect you will have for a man who did it with an axe and a saw, a hand saw, it goes through the roof. Like I've cleared an area the size of my office with a chainsaw, and you're sucking wind by the time you're done with that small area. And then you're talking about taking that and going into a field to plant. It's insane what people before us did, or our recent ancestors, I guess you would say. And I think that should be an impetus for us to just like work with what we have.
Yeah. Like I started when I first moved here, I couldn't afford a chainsaw. I did use an axe and a one-man handsaw. I cut 10 trees down.
Yeah.
And I was done. I didn't even break them down. I just got them on the ground and was like, I'll get a chainsaw next year. Yeah. So I have huge respect for that. And especially like pulling the stumps out, like having a workhorse and doing that. It's crazy what people did. Well, we think it's crazy now because of the way we grew up. But.
Yeah, a lot of times though it was like a family effort, and being on your own is a little different than some of these. Back then they would have families with like 20 kids, and you're like, why? Well, that's my workforce, right?
Yeah.
We need another employee, honey. Let's go to the bedroom. And 4 years later you'll have somebody that can do something. What's the biggest lesson you've learned in all this in the process of kind of setting up your homestead?
Biggest lesson that I've learned? That's a big question. I need to take a second for that because I've learned a lot of lessons. But the biggest one,
pick a big one.
A big one. The biggest lesson I'd say every time you ask me this, I'll probably give you a different answer. But right now, I would say like don't. That's the phrase. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And in relation to that, like when I even was just looking at this property when I bought it, and any property I was looking at, but even after I bought this, I got like I paid some service to get the topographical maps. I wanted to know what the contours were, and I made all these plans, and I was like, I had all these drawings, like this is what it's going to look like, and then I get here, and nothing has gone to plan. Like nothing, not one thing has gone to plan, but things have turned out better than I could have planned. And that's the thing. So yeah, I would say that's been the biggest lesson is you need to be kind of strong-willed and throw your head against the wall sometimes to break through, but there are certain things that you do need to adjust and reorientate yourself.
Yeah. We always said in the military, no battle plan will survive contact with the enemy. You're going to have to adapt and adjust on the fly. And when you're dealing with nature, you don't want nature to be an enemy. But if you don't accept that, it becomes one very quickly. And you're dealing with a dynamic thing when you deal with nature, meaning that it moves, it changes, it fluctuates. The place there was never a flood, you change one thing over here and you redirected water flow, and now there's a flood over here. And you can say, I want to stop that, or you can say, well, wait a minute, maybe it's a pond site. Just as one example, like you have to be adaptive because you're dealing with a dynamic component, like multiple dynamic components on the other side. The most complex dynamic system that we know of is our ecosystem that is on this planet, and that's what you're going into. You're dealing with Mother Nature, and she can be your friend and keep you alive, or she can kill your ass, right? And everything in between that. Like there's a lot of frustration that doesn't get anywhere near it's killing you, but it's pretty frustrating that this thing I thought was going to work doesn't work. I learned that when we came here. I had a background in gardening. I knew all kinds of stuff about gardening. I was a good gardener. I grew up, I was 8 years old. I was out cutting broccoli florets and blanching up cauliflower. I got here to Texas. I planted broccoli. It all died. It all instantly, because it's so hot, it instantly bolted and went to seed and died. Cauliflower didn't even care. Like cauliflower said, I hate you for putting me here. Screw off. I'm not doing anything. I'm just gonna wilt and go into the ground. And then you realize, okay, so what I knew there doesn't even work here. And you kind of have to reboot and restart. And I think that, like, if you don't know anything, in some ways that's an advantage because you expect failure. Where if you think you know what you're doing and you've changed ecosystems, that new ecosystem's like, I see what you planned there. Good luck with that. Welcome to Texas. It's like we make a joke. I made a joke the other day. I said it was so hot here that the hobbits came and threw a ring in my backyard to get rid of it. Like it was a totally different ecosystem. And whether you're making that change because you're going from a city to the country, or you've in the country, but you've dramatically changed your climate type. I was just listening to one of Jeff's talks on that. And he was talking about how the first thing you really need to think about is what climate are you in? Because that changes anything. He was talking to a group of students. He said, I can come here with all this knowledge, but if I give you a design, and I don't think about the fact that this group he was talking to, you're in a continental climate, and I start designing subtropics from Australia for you, nothing is really going to work. You almost have to be a little bit of a climatologist or a weather person and understand the climate you're operating in. And that's just one piece of that dynamic situation.
Yeah, no, when I moved here, like the soil here in this part of the country is different than the soil where I come from. Yeah. So like it's very dense, like blue, black clay. I think there's like black gumbo clay in Texas.
Yeah, that's what we call it. Probably similar.
Yeah, it's like rock solid, like concrete in the summer, and then in the winter it's like sludge. So that's what I'm living on, and like you could build skyscrapers out of this stuff. It's crazy. So like that. Adjusting with that, I didn't anticipate that. So that's just one of the things that I've had to deal with.
Yeah, we call it Blackland Prairie is the clay type here, but black gumbo is the more colloquial term, and it's pretty accurate. It is like goo, right? Yeah, and it's a different thing than that beautiful high till soil that I grew up with as a kid. I used to joke. I mean, you could take a tomato and throw it on the ground and come back in a couple of weeks and there'd be a plant. And people laugh.
Yeah.
I'm not completely joking when I say that. You literally could bury a tomato and a bunch of baby tomato plants would just come up, and the strongest one would win, and it would be a new plant. It's, I saw plants go from seed to, a tomato plant be this big in 4 to 6 weeks, direct sowed. And if you try that here, it's just not going to happen. You have to take a different approach. Yeah. How do you earn your living now? I mean, I know you've probably driven your costs as low as possible, but there's probably not a lot of hospitality jobs in a place with 200 people.
I got very lucky.
Okay.
Lucky or blessed. There's a small coffee shop about like a 10-minute cycle from me. So I do that on the weekends. When I first moved here, all of my neighbors were so great, and they still are. Like I don't think I'd still be here if it wasn't for my neighbors, but there's a lot of work around, especially for a young man out in a rural area. Because a lot of young men, like here in Ireland, a lot of young men have gone off to Canada. They've gone to the States. They've gone to Australia. And there's been huge like waves over the years of young people leaving. So for a young man to come into a rural area, there's a lot of work. So I've done painting and fencing and a bit of roofing and stuff like that, which I've had no experience doing any of that. I would just say yes. I would just go to it.
Yeah.
But so I've done that. I've kind of slowed down doing that kind of stuff. This summer I will be doing a bit more painting.
Okay.
But the big thing is just that part-time. I just do the 2 days a week, and then I have 5 days a week to myself to fish or work in the garden. And I am planning on doing things with the homestead. Once I get my production going, it's kind of, you need to get those cycles moving in order to start making that money. So I'm still in the early stages, even at 2 years, to get to that point where I can be selling eggs or selling vegetables or fermented stuff, whatever it is I'll end up doing.
That's great. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for young people that have the healthy, strong back and the work ethic, in these situations. Like when I moved here, one of the first things I looked for was a good handyman. And not because I couldn't do it, because I don't have the time.
Yeah.
Because I run a business. So I have money, they have time, and they need money. That's a form of barter, And once you find a good one, like anything you need done, call John. Just to tell my wife, just call John, get him to do it. Well, how much? I don't care. All I know is if I spend 6 hours working on that versus 6 hours working in my business, I'm going to be negative, and he'll do a better job. And if he gets hurt, I don't have workers' comp. Like that's the young man's world of falling off. You fall off a roof when you're 30. As long as you don't break your neck, you'll be back at it in a couple of weeks. I fall off a roof, I'm done for the rest of my life. Right? I'm finished. Like you just don't heal anymore. So if you got a work ethic and you're willing to like figure stuff out, especially if you do work like, well, this job pays $50. If you end up taking 3 days to do it, as long as I didn't need it done today, I don't really care. And you did lose some time, but then you learned that. And the next time you do that job, it won't take you 3 days. It'll take you a day,
Yeah. Like I installed my own windows here on the cottage. It took me 2 weeks to do it because I was like, I'd pause for a few days and be like, okay, the next step, am I going to mess it up? But then I installed someone else's windows just a couple of weeks after that, and I did a perfect job.
Yeah.
Because I think it was because I did spend that time with each step, and I really was very slow and methodical and reading all the different ways you could do it. Then I could go and do someone else's for money. And I think that's, if you have it, like I don't have a car, I just have a bicycle, and I managed to do this. But if you're a young person who wants to go out to a rural setting and you are worried about work, I think if you have a pickup truck or a van or even like a small hatchback and a small trailer, I don't think there's any excuse really, if you're in any way handy, to not make money. Even just clearing sheds, there's money in that.
I completely agree. There's always something people need done. And it's usually cash money, you, me, and the fence post type of situation, you know, and that's a great way to get going. When you started out and you're like, I'm going to move to the country, I'm going to need a place to go. How much money did you have? Like, what was your budget?
When I decided, or
when you did
when
it?
I was actually
Yeah,
when
when
I
you
did
actually pulled the trigger, like
when I pulled the trigger, I had like 30. So the property was 30,000 euro.
okay.
And then I have a mobile home, so that one cost me 4,000, and it cost me 1,200 for delivery.
Okay.
And then I had 300 euro left over, and that was it. And I had a hammock. Well, before the mobile arrived, I slept in a hammock and a tarp, and I was working in the coffee shop doing that.
Wow. So you did have some money saved up. It just all went into the purchase of the land and everything else. And a euro's a little bit more in value than the dollar, but may have not been at the time. So it's like a dollar, a euro and 9 pence, I guess, to a US dollar right now. So you could pretty much say you had about between $35,000 and $40,000.
Yeah.
And that's what you spent. And then you had almost nothing left. So you managed to save that up. How long did, like, once you were committed, like, this is what I'm doing, how long did that take?
Yeah, so to get that, like 5,000 a year isn't an unreasonable goal.
So that's,
and you do that over something like that. And then if you have any extra, you just put that into your house jar. So it does take a couple of years. If you earn more money than me,
you do it faster.
Then you do it faster. If you're living at home and you're not paying rent, it's even faster. Or if that's not an option for you, you can save up, like, let's say 10 grand, get a van and do the van life thing for a while.
Yeah.
So you can stop paying the rent. And I think that's like, if you're older, it's tougher to do what I've done. But if you're younger, if you're my age or younger, maybe you don't have a lot of assets, you haven't built up your wealth over time, but you're more spry and you can do these things. And you should play to your advantages and not try and play just like the boomer game.
Yeah. I think that's the problem that so many people today they're younger, even younger than you. Even they look at the boomers with this whole kind of, I don't want to use the word hatred, but adversarial mindset. Like, you guys took everything and we have nothing, right? And then they turn right around and they try to actually live the same life, right?
Yeah, I just want what you have.
Yeah.
I'm sour because I don't have it. There's a little bit of that,
And you broke the playing field, but I'm going to go on the field and play the same game instead of do something completely different. Because it is a different landscape today. And when I look at, like, especially really young people, like in their early 20s or late teens, I'm like, you could go work for building contractors just to learn skills. And by the time you went through 2 years of that, you could have completely built kind of a mobile tiny house. And you should have a pocket wad full of money on top of it, because it either went into the house, you ate it because you got to live, got to eat, or it should have been saved if you really wanted to do this. And now you've got a dwelling to start with, because we're going to get into what you had to do to start. You mentioned the mobile, because I know the place you moved into was like just a wreck when you first got there, and you had to completely rehab it. But then that person would have, good solid 4 walls, roof, toilet, whatever. And if you want a job framing and you'll show up on time and not be drunk, you can get a job framing. You don't have to know what you're doing. They'll teach you. And in a week, the basics of framing, and if you want a job doing drywall, it might have to travel a little bit or whatever, or work cheap. But if you're looking at it from a skill set development plan, and then when you wind up where you are, you've got some money, you've got a place to stay, or maybe you don't build the thing, maybe you buy an RV, like a towable RV or something, but have something. And one thing I'll say about RVs, though, guys, you don't want to live through a hard winter in an RV. It's no matter how much heat you put in it, it's a rough life. I've seen people, like, in really harsh winters, like, just give up with an RV. Like, everything freezes up no matter what. I imagine your winters are pretty harsh. But so you saved up about 40,000 US dollars. And how much did you say you had left when so now you gotta fix everything. You moved to your new place. How much did you have in your pocket at that point? Like $300 or something?
Yeah, about that. Like enough to get me to the next week. And I didn't even have the job. I had the trial for the job. Sorry, I had the trial for the job, and I was just banking that I'd get it.
Yeah.
So, and then just for the property, didn't have a driveway. Had nothing. Like it was just basically raw land at this stage. Like it hadn't been lived in for 30, 40 years by the time I got to it. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Was there any temptation, like if I just stay put for another 6 months, like even if you had bought the stuff, if I just stay here for another 6 months, I could save up another few $1,000 before I go? Or was it like, I got to get on with doing this? I guess that's what won out anyway.
Well, I did have a little bit more money at first. But then COVID came.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The big C. So then I was like, and I was a dog walker. So paying my rent was coming out. So my rent was like $750 a month. So that started coming out of my savings. And because obviously as a dog walker, I was like entering into other people's homes.
Yeah.
So people didn't want me in their homes. So I wasn't really working.
Okay.
So my money was dwindling, and I was like, and then these properties, there's a lot of them here in Ireland, like these old ruined cottages. But there's some that I was looking at for, like, they'd be up on the market for 5-6 years, and I'd just be looking at them.
Yeah.
And then when 2020 happened, like they were just boom, 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 selling. They were just disappearing.
Yeah.
So I was just like, all right, well, I need to get in on this. And we had like travel restrictions at the time.
Yeah.
So like it was very strict at one stage. You couldn't go beyond 2 kilometers, like let's say like a mile, so like less than a mile from your home. There's things like that. I was just out on my bicycle cycling around the country. But there, you could still get public transport like buses and trains, and they wouldn't stop you, but you couldn't drive out. So I would just take my bike on the train, and I was just going viewing cottages and things. And
crazy.
So then I bought this, and then I could have then just sat on the property, because my intention was to save up more before I bought it. But I had to buy this before my money disappeared. And I could have sat for longer with it, but that job posting was listed for the coffee shop, and I was like, this is just too perfect. Like it's I'm just gonna go for it, you know.
Sure.
So I was just kind of on a whim, on a chance. It wasn't really too planned out, but Alone is my favorite show. So I was like, I'll just be like alone in my hammock. Yeah.
So it was kind of really, like, I don't think the cottage was really, you'd call it livable. So did you use the mobile and you lived there, or did you just camp, or what did you?
So for the first while, it was the hammock until the mobile arrived, and getting that delivered was like a whole other thing. Because again, there was no driveway to bring the mobile onto the property. So I had to like do a really, really bad job of putting in like a small little pad myself, which didn't end up working. It sunk into the ground anyway. But so there's that. I didn't have any running water. I have no electricity. So I have a small generator. It's like a knockoff version of the Honda 2000. So I had that, and no heating, no nothing. There's a well across the road, but it's in bad condition. But I do have water on the property, but it wasn't piped to anything. It was just on what you get on the street. So I'd have to like reach my arm into the valve every time I wanted water, undo the cover, put my arm in, undo the valve, then run around with a bucket and just like kind of point the hose into the bucket, and that's how I got my water. My plan, like what you were saying there with the RV, you don't want to do winter in an RV. You don't want to do winter in the mobile home that I got either, because it's not residential spec. This thing is like really, really flimsy. It's like maybe like an inch of styrofoam insulation and just single pane glass. So I moved in the beginning of the summer, and then the plan then was get into the cottage. Well, initially it was ASAP, but I got distracted just working and trying to get money together, because I needed to get a full, proper, like 50-meter driveway, like 50-yard driveway. So I had to save up for that. So that's why I was doing a lot of odd jobs. I was working 7 days a week then. So I had my coffee shop job, and then I was doing a lot of work for one of my neighbors who's a part-time farmer, and he's also does some other odd jobs, like on like small construction jobs, you know, like installing windows, those types of things.
Yeah.
So eventually I did get that money together for the driveway so I could move, because the mobile was like right on the road, and there's big, like the forestry trucks are driving by, like the big Arctics and the quarries. They're driving up and down my road all the time. So in the middle of the night, they like a big truck could go flying by, and it's like 2 meters from my head. So I had to get my mobile up off the road, up next to the cottage. So that was my big first thing I wanted to get done. And then after that, well, I don't know, that was done after, but by the end of the summer, I started realizing, I haven't done anything I've been so obsessed with the driveway and getting the mobile away. I haven't done anything to the cottage. So that's why I was like kind of panicked at that stage. I still haven't really done much with it. I've given it a paint job. Like this place, actually that corner there where the bookshelf is, there was like all black all up that wall and all up the ceiling, because someone had lit a fire here one stage. I don't know, where some teenagers having a party or something. And there's paint peeling off the walls. There's spiders everywhere. It was damp because the drainage ditches behind the house, they were all blocked up after like decades of not being used. So I had to do all of that as well. All I really did was just the windows, the paint job, fix the drainage behind the house, and then put the stove in. Yeah, that's still all I've done, because I wanted to focus then. So that's now a year and a half has just been working outside. I want to get my vegetable garden. I want to get my chickens, get the infrastructure in place, because I could still be living in my hammock up until this point if I wanted to. I'm very low maintenance myself. And I kind of forgot what your original question is, and I rambled off there.
No, it was just you answered it. It's how did you live when you moved into this place and the house really?
Oh, right, yeah,
you know,
yeah. So that's how I lived. Oh yeah, cooking on a campfire for a long time. That was also another thing. So, and washing was just like a bucket and a little small hand towel, and just scrubbing myself. That was up until I have a hillbilly hot tub now, so I'm moving up in the world.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that say that they can't do this, that if they did, their starting point would be ahead of where you are right now. They'd have a lot more luxury than you have even a year and a half in, but yet they talk themselves out of it, because the idea of downgrading quality of life is a very uncomfortable thing for people in our time, you know? And I think it's living in a world, and the younger people more so, and I'm not picking on them because they're young, because we were all young. And yes, when you're really young, you're stupid. We all were, you know, I'm old enough that there's not a digital record of it. But what we did have what we didn't have when I was a kid was 1,000 channels on television. We didn't have an internet. We didn't have mobile phones. I remember when pagers were something rich people had. Nobody even uses them. Pagers are pointless now. Like, everybody has a mobile phone. So we didn't have this stuff. And so it makes people so comfortable having everything on demand. I mean, I remember we got our first microwave oven, right? And then you could like cook food fast. And like, that was crazy to me. I remember first time I ever saw a microwave was actually at a restaurant my grandmother worked at. I didn't know what it was. And she heated up a piece of pie for me. And she took this pie out of the little spinny thing they have in diners. And I know it's ice cold in there. And she gives me this pie in like 30 seconds and it's screaming hot. And it blew my mind. I couldn't get my head around it. I was like 6 years old. I'm like, how? And so if you've never experienced the life prior to all this stuff, it can be kind of scary to let go of it. But trust me, it'll be okay, right? I mean, you did it.
Yeah, it's not, well, for me anyway, it's not as hard as you really think. Like if you narrow it down, and I think this is what I learned when I was like learning camping and bushcrafting stuff and foraging, is like we all have like very basic needs. Like we need food, we need water, we need shelter. That's it. It's just those three things. And everything that we've done in society is just this we've just complicated all of these systems to still do just those three main functions. You know, at the end of the day, everything you do is just to serve one of those three things. I don't care what your job is. You're trying, because you're just trading your time for money in order to pay for your like central heating in your home, which is just replacing a campfire. And I think people don't know how warm a campfire can be to sleep next to.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially done right. There's fire itself has this kind of deep, penetrating heat that's kind of different than central heat. You know, when you have heat in a house, like it warms the air. It's not. It's not like when you put like a light bulb for chickens in a brooder, and they get there and it literally penetrates those little birds' body. It radiates, or a heat lamp for like a lizard, and that's kind of what fire heat is. Or like I grew up, we had a coal furnace and we had radiators, these big cast iron things with a boiler system that put hot water through them, and they radiate. That's called radiators. They radiate heat, and the way that heat penetrates you is a different thing. And it's actually very, very comforting. Like one of the things that you can, if you dig into, like, well, how did people keep warm in the past? Even when they had a house or whatever, they heated the person, not the space. Because when you had like a wood stove or a fireplace or whatever, you can't heat the whole house. So everybody, when it's cold, kind of gathered around the fire type of thing.
Yeah, like this, where the cottage that I'm sitting in now is like 300 years old. And it's like the perfect eco home. Now, if you want to get planning permission to build a one-off home today, you need to have all of this modern materials and like synthetic materials for insulation, all these sorts of things to get an eco or whatever, to get that green star rating, you know?
Yeah.
The way this is designed, like this window, like this window sill here is like knee height. So the window's very low because the heat will be up higher, right?
Yeah.
These walls are like 2 foot thick. They're huge, big, thick stone walls. There's nothing but stone and just limecrete. So that stove behind me, it's not heating. Like, yes, it does radiate like the air in the room somewhat. Yeah. But what you're really trying to do is heat the walls.
Heat the stone up,
the walls will hold on to that heat. It's like a big version of a rocket mass heater. It's not as, I don't think it's as efficient as the rocket mass heater, but it's that same idea. The stones are what you're trying to heat up. And then the low window also during the summer, the sun doesn't actually hit that glass during the summer.
Yeah.
So that keeps this, when it gets really, really hot, I need to hide in here to get out of the heat. But then during the winter, that sun will hit the back wall.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's built perfectly.
Because they had to.
Yeah.
Right? Before, you had a thermostat on your wall and you could just set it wherever you wanted, and electricity and all the stuff we take for granted. When you built a house, it required you to think about that. But when we build houses today, they put in a street. How many can I fit on the street? Orientation. I don't know. Like, some houses are this way, some are that way. We want to do it so they back up and they share fence lines or whatever. Like, there's no thought into like solar orientation or where's your prevailing winds. And, you know, in one climate, I really want to capture heat. I want to put the priority on that. A different climate, maybe I really want to shed heat. Like, most climates, we want to do a little of both, but what do I give priority to? There's a big difference in latitude, right, between where you live and where I live. Like,
Yeah.
I barely even turn my heat on in the winter. We have the rare occurrences, big cold fronts, but I mean, we've had days where it's 35 degrees outside and we don't even want to think about turning the heat on because the house just like, we got lucky. It's oriented the right way. It's kind of, even though it's a modern house, it worked out.
Yeah, it just happened that your street did just happen.
Yeah. If somebody would have built it on the street behind me, it would have been completely oriented the wrong way. I guarantee you. Like, but when you did this back 300 years ago, which is how old you're saying your place is, which now I'm really intrigued. You had to think that way. You had no choice. And you mentioned the wall being that thick because like the guy that built your cottage was like, I want my grandchildren to live in this house. Right. Yeah. So they built it with that mindset of going forward. And today, like you said, you got to do all this crap to be eco-friendly, and you're absolutely not. What you have, it exceeds the quality of something that's the Green Star or whatever now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of my neighbors has one of the, I can't remember the name of it. It's the thermal heaters. Like you have like the pipes running underground with the air
geothermal
to heat them. Yeah. So they have one of those, and like we had like the energy crisis, is what people are calling it. She can't turn that thing off, and it was getting to a point where she wanted to save money on her bills, but she couldn't because you can't. Like once that thing's on, it has to stay on.
Yeah.
We had so it's just complicated. I think like there's complex systems in nature and the complicated systems that we like to create. There's very little steps in what I've got here. It's just orientate the building correctly, have your windows right, your doors right, your walls thick enough. There's not a lot that can go wrong, except for me. I'm the only thing that can go wrong.
You're the dynamic component of the system, right? What are some of the things you have gotten done? It sounds like you're still pretty early in this, but you mentioned you don't have chickens yet. I guess your neighbor does because I heard one sounding off.
Oh no, that's mine. That's mine. So I do have chickens now.
Okay.
I got a first flock the summer that I moved down. I was just like, you put the cart before the horse, or you get the livestock before the fence. So I was just so excited to get a flock of chickens, and my neighbor said, "Oh, I'm going to get some rescue hens from this." We have this thing here where the battery egg farms, they will, when the chicken's a year old, instead of culling them as much as they can, they will travel around to different towns and sell them for
that's cool.
Yeah. Sell them very cheap. You still need to sell them a little bit, otherwise restaurants will try and get like cheap meat.
Yeah.
So you do have to pay a little bit, but it's like €6 rather than like, let's say €18 for what I paid for mine. But those ones that I originally got, they all died in a week. That was a lesson learned. Fox got them all in the space of 2 hours. All of them were gone. So, but I have a flock now. I've got chicks now that I hatched out in the incubator. So I got 5 survivors out of 8 eggs that hatched. So I've got a total of 12 chickens at the minute.
Okay.
Well, one cockerel, two baby roosters, and then the rest are all hens.
Yeah. I went with bantams and because they reproduce so well, and now that's actually turned into a problem. I've got girls on eggs everywhere, and I just caught another one to have 24 freaking eggs. I'm like, there's no way you're hatching all of those, but I don't want to get rid of them because I don't know how far along they are, because she did a really good job of finding a place to hide.
See, I've been thinking of getting bantams or some silkies just for hatching. But I'm still not sure about that. I was like, what if she hatches like way too many or something? I don't know. But
and then you got a girl big enough to eat them, right? And the bantams, the bantams are actually delicious. They're just little, and they take a long time to get the size of a pigeon, right? Like where they're worth processing, But they are broody. We the main plan was we'll use them to hatch ducks. And that's worked okay, because ducklings are like 3 times as expensive as chicks if you're buying them in. So we want to hatch, every year. And I don't like being mama duck. I don't like brooding. I prefer to let nature do it. And the Bantam chickens, they do great. They do great with their little ducks. They hatch, and then they kind of look at them like, why are you a freak? But they're like, all right, so I got freaks for kids, and they go on about their way. And
I think especially for you, like the ducks are a little more complicated to hatch in an incubator, and it's just almost a bit too much hassle. So
they take longer. Your fertility is never as high. Like I've thrown 32 chicken eggs in an incubator and hatched 31 chickens. Right. I have never gotten better than about 60% with ducks. So you're going to have a certain amount that fail, as long as that broody bird gets something out of it, she gets some babies, she's happy. She goes on with her life. So if you get a bunch of them going, you can, we added about 24 ducks, I guess, maybe 20 new ducks this year that way. And, they're $7-8 a piece now as ducklings. And you're always going to lose some of those. Right.
Yeah.
Like you're never going to get all of them to adulthood, because when you get them from a hatchery, there's always issues. And, $7 is buying straight run. You start buying sexed and you're looking at like $10-12. Well, if I end up with some surplus drakes from hatching, freezer camp, baby, duck next to the turkey on the Thanksgiving table, that's fine too. But when you buy straight run, you're already going to get a big feed debt. You've learned that already, the feed debt thing when you get chicks. Like, I got free eggs. Well, in 24 weeks, I'll get my first egg, and it will be like $100 egg, and then they're free.
Yeah, absolutely. But you asked about my infrastructure, so it's like I do have the chickens.
How are you protecting them now? Do you have them like in a coop and run, or to keep the foxes at bay?
Yeah, I just have poultry netting.
Okay.
So at the minute I've got 100 meters, like 2 big lengths of poultry netting, and that keeps them away. The foxes have come in, but I have a cat and a dog, and they both chase the foxes.
Okay.
Because my cat's been with me for a long time. She grew up in the city, but there's a lot of foxes in the city in Dublin, so she's used to them. And then that net, I think, like once a fox gets one shock, it's not coming back. So, they're safe enough now, and I've got my no-dig garden in. I did do an experiment last year because I couldn't afford to do a no-dig garden, but I wanted to grow something and also kind of prep the area that I was going to dig in. So I just got a big tarp, put 2 bales of silage underneath, and just spread that out, cut holes in it, and just planted right in the holes in the tarp, and it worked. I grew food, not a lot of food that I'd actually eat myself. I was hoping the chickens would eat it, but chickens turns out are a lot pickier than I thought. They don't like kale, and I grew a lot of kale. I thought they'd love it.
The thing with chickens is, and I don't think a lot of people know this, that we hear about like our grandparents and all the generation, they fed the chickens the scraps from the kitchen, But like, this is what my grandmother did. She would take all that stuff and throw it like in a thing, like pretty much what I do now for composting. But she wouldn't compost it. She'd wait till she had enough to throw like a big pot we had a coal stove, and she would just throw it on the coal stove and then throw everything in it and put water in it. And she would cook it down to like a mash. And that's what she fed her chickens. And she would say a lot of the stuff they'll eat, once you do this to it, they'll eat it. But if you give it to them raw, they don't want it. They're not interested.
Yeah.
And that's like one of those things that like, I probably should have talked about that more on the show by now, but it's one of those things like, I don't do that. And because I don't do something, I tend not to talk about it. But if I wanted to feed them that stuff, that's what I would do. I would do what my grandmother did.
Yeah. No, they won't turn down meat. That's
no.
The favorite thing. They won't turn, but like the stuff where I see people on Instagram and on YouTube, and they're like, "Oh, my chickens love the lettuce," and like mine will just walk on it. They'll just walk away. They run up all excited. I throw the lettuce, and they're like, "Oh," then they're off again.
Yeah. No. I've seen, like, we've had some bones and stuff with some meat left on it, and you throw it out there, and they'll pick it like it's museum quality when they're done with it. There's nothing left. They are little dinosaurs is the joke, but there's something to that. And like, Today I was out checking on one of my worm bins, and somehow some black soldier flies got in there, and so I picked out all the grubs. And when I threw that down, that was battle royal chicken fights, man. Like they want that protein and fat. It's whenever somebody says that, like you see stuff that they sell in like eggs or chicken, and they'll say 100% vegetarian diet. Well, the only way to guarantee that is to lock the animal up. Because if you put a chicken outside, if it's alive and fits in a beak, it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even the chicks are really funny because every now and then you just see them hop up into the air because they're like jumping up to try and catch a fly.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's a lot of fun watching them. But they definitely love anything alive. And then even the dead stuff. I make my own. I don't raise my own ducks, but I do buy a whole duck and I'll process that down. I'll confit it and save the fat, and I'll just throw the carcass out to the chickens, and they go mad for it.
Yeah,
and like they pick the bones clean. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you did it to one of their brothers or sisters, they do that too. They don't discriminate. It's kind of creepy to think about it that way, but chicken eat chicken, right? And most things eat their own kind to a degree. Like fish eat little fish, right? All the mollusks, most of the mollusks in the ocean live on other mollusks, right? That's just nature.
Yeah.
We as humans find that off-putting, but nature doesn't care. I'm sure you've seen the meme with like, making fun of vegans or whatever. And it's like a little mouse and a frog sitting next to each other. And the mouse is like up on the frog, checking him out. It's like, I trust nature or something. And the next thing, the frog's eating the mouse. And it says like nature. This is what nature really is. The frog ate the mouse. So you did get at least the beginnings of the garden in. Have you made any progress this year, like going to like the next level?
Yeah, no, I've done a full no-dig garden. I brought in, I need to remember now, like 10 tons of soil and not 10 tons, sorry, 10 cubic meters. Okay. 10 cubic meters of soil and 10 cubic meters of wood chips for the pathways. And I've done just a big no-dig garden. And learning like no dig does not mean no weeds.
Yeah.
But this because the rhizomatous stuff, the rhizomatous isn't the right word, is it? Rhizomatous. Well, anyway, rhizomes. The horsetail, big issue. The horsetail that breaks through. No matter what you put in, the horsetail break through. And like creeping buttercups, couch grass, anything that's already established underneath is still going to come through. But I just weeding that like once or twice a day. It's not that much work if you do it that often.
Yeah. That's the key with weeding, is to do it all the time, a little at a time. When you wait even 2 weeks, it's like, what have I done? And then you don't want to do it, so then you put it off till now you got 3 weeks. And like you said, stuff with rhizomes is really like our big thing here that always invades the garden beds is called Bermuda grass. And it grows from rhizomes. It's perennial grass, and it sends out runners. And I even have like my beds are like 2 foot tall, and it'll come up inside the raised bed from the inside and invade that way. And I should have weed blocked all around those, and that's one of those I'll get to it things, and I haven't gotten to it yet. But if you do stay on it, it's a lot easier. Because when you do conventional gardening where you dig, you get the beginning of your spring and you do it, and it looks perfect. It's all level. It's all, and then it's that I know it still happens when you do no dig, but it happens so much more when you dig it up, when you till it, because that's a germination trigger, that soil disturbance, and then everything goes. But it's cool that you've begun to really make some progress, and you kind of have documented some of the stuff. Like you have a YouTube and an Instagram and what have you, right?
Yeah, I don't really update the Instagram too often. Like I'll just whenever I remember. But I do have a YouTube channel. I do upload videos. I've started doing more live streams lately. I'm really enjoying those. But that's another. The live streams are another learning curve as well. Just learning the software, even just the hardware you don't think about, and then your internet connection goes. Things all the time, but I'm having fun with it, and it's the same thing with the homesteading. Is like I'm having fun failing. I'm having fun failing with my live streams.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you using for your live stream? Are you using StreamYard like we are here? Or you got something else or?
No, I'm using Streamlabs, but like now I'm seeing stream because like I had a guest on last week, but I was using like Zoom and trying to mirror that in. But I'm here through StreamYard, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna have a look at StreamYard. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Like when I'm just having like a little bit of a memory now that I'm talking about it, like just failing, and just going back to not being afraid to do that. Like when I started my YouTube channel, which you can see there on the screen, I started that with a broken phone that like the screen was completely cracked and held together with sellotape.
Yeah,
that's how I started off, and now I've got my 5,000 subs, and like the channel's growing, and but I wasn't afraid to start with just me like shaky holding the phone like that, you know. And it's like I'm not afraid to start my homestead with what I have and just make it work, you know. I think a lot of people, as we said earlier with the homestead, they think they need all the money at once. They need to have the perfect garden in with the perfect raised beds using the railway sleepers and the perfectly fenced chicken run. And you could just get started with, like, one of my neighbors has chickens in a coal bunker, like a big plastic tub to hold coal. And that's what he keeps his chickens in. You can just start off with what you have.
Yeah, I would completely agree. That's one of the things, like, we refer to it as the toolbox fallacy. People like, I have to wait until I have the better thing or whatever. And, you know, if you wait till you have the better thing, you probably will never have the better thing. But if you start with what you have, you probably will have an even better thing than the thing that you think you need, if that makes any sense, because then you figure things out. And I've been impressed with how many people have done the YouTube thing in the homesteading space, like the fishing, like every niche you can think of, fishing, tropical fish, because that's a big thing for me, hunting and whatever. And they end up with, they have way more than they ever thought they would, because they literally build a business off of documenting what they're doing. But what I've noticed is the most successful ones, if you go all the way back, they all did what you just said. Not a single one of them came out of the gate. They had multiple camera angles and studio lighting. And like, I started my podcast. I literally had a $20 Plantronics MP3, or I remember who it was. Plantronics was a headset. I had like a headset, like the old school, look like your Luke Skywalker and X-Wing thing that I had for my phone. That's how long ago that was. And it plugged into this little MP3 player, and I did it in my car. And it was road noise, and I'd be driving, and this is how you do the dehydrate zucchini, and you asshole, get out of my way. And people were like, and people dug that though. Instead of like, there was always, it's too much background noise. Don't listen. But like, one of my favorite guys on YouTube is a dude named Brandt, and he's a professional fishing guide. He actually quit guiding because he makes so much money off his YouTube channel now. And if you go watch his first, like his videos now, they're all professionally edited. They're well scripted. They follow a formula. They've got great thumbnails. His first videos were like he's in his boat with a iPhone like tied to his thing, just videoing himself, like, you know, fake GoPro angles and stuff. And it's no editing and all. And dude's got like 1 million subs.
Yeah.
And I think that loyal people come from the time you're building that way, because they're like, they're rooting for you. You know, I experienced that.
Like they see the growth and development. Like I have got my regular commenters and stuff, and it's a really cool way to get to know people. And I just started a Telegram group chat thing because I want to get more people interacting with each other. There's still only like 8 people in there right now, but but that's what I really love, and that's why I started moving into the live streams. I think that's I find that a lot more fun than the edited videos. I'm not going to stop with the edited videos, but I'll definitely be doing a lot more of these.
I think they both work, and they both do different things, you know, because you're not going to do a live feed and show that your chicken coop slid over and you have to lift it back up or whatever. Like, that has to be done differently. I think the other thing you get a new appreciation for when you do what you're doing, you think when you watch a YouTuber that's a homesteader, for instance, and they're they're building their chicken coop or they're putting in fencing or whatever. Well, I'll just video it while I do it. And you end up with more work in the video side.
Yeah.
Like you could have been done yesterday with the project, but because you're videoing it, it takes longer. It's more complicated, but
it takes
I think it's worth
5
doing.
times longer.
Yeah. I think it's worth doing though, because the value. I mean, I know you had to have learned a ton of shit from YouTube University, right?
Yeah. Well, like I was just laughing there because I'm building a new chicken coop and I was filming it. I'm like, so I'm not gonna really go. I'll get into it in the video if people are really interested in it. But my filming had to stop because of the weather. And and then I had someone here helping me, and then they had to leave. So at the same time, so we just had to be like, all right, we can't film anything. We just need to get this done. We need to get this watertight before because the thunderstorm came through. So we just had to give it up. So now that video is it's going to be a bit choppy, but that's kind of part of it. It's funny that you said it's the chicken coop thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's not easy to film everything, you know.
And what I've seen, like what seems to work for a lot of people, is they just set up a camera. They don't worry about audio, and then they just pick pieces of it and they voice over it in the editing. You know, and then they'll time lapse through certain things, like, you know, I rose the 4 walls, and it happens in 1 minute, and it took the guy. You see the sun go down, the guy leave, and the guy come back. Sun come up, and he goes back to work. Like, and you figure out the formula that works for you. Some people like that. I think I would hate that. I like to teach while I'm doing a thing.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like But if anybody does happen to go to my channel, like my videos are I still haven't found that yet. Like what's the best formula for me? Yeah. I'm still like playing around with. You'll see my earlier videos are way different than like my middle videos, and then even they're different than my later ones. But I'll be doing the voiceover thing for this chicken coop video because it's just the way it has to be.
Very cool, man. Well, I definitely recommend that everybody subscribe to your YouTube channel. We'll make sure it is in the show notes. I can't mess it up because it already is, because the notes are already done. I have your Instagram, and you have a Telegram group, I guess, or a Telegram contact in there too. I appreciate you being with us today. I think that we need to do more episodes like this. People that are just at the beginning of their journey, they gave up what they had to go get something new. I think that's one of the more popular forms of interviews that we do. And we've had people that, you know, did it when they're 55 and they had a lot of money when they did it. We did have people like yourself that, like, you barely had enough to buy. And we've even had people that, like, they started with way less than you had, you know, and it's good to see it from wherever. Like you said, you mentioned the van. Like, I had one person on, they literally lived in their car. They barely had money for raw land, and they lived in their car while they set things up. I remember back, been about 2014-ish, at one of the Permaculture Voices conferences I spoke at. There were 2 guys there, one from California, one from the Midwest, and they had both apprenticed with Mark Shepard to learn how to farm, and they did a talk on how to get land. So it was a ton of young people went to that one. Man, that room was full of people. I'm looking around. I'm like an old man, and this is 10 years ago, and I was an old man in that room. And they were like, I could tell all these young guys were like, there's going to be some kind of trick, you know. And the one guy was like, so we scraped up, saved enough money. We bought raw land. I went out and cut a bunch of trees down and made poles. And then my wife sewed a yurt. We just bought the material. We didn't even buy a pre-made yurt. We lived in that for 3 years. And the other one, the guy bought a FEMA trailer that was like after the people from Hurricane Katrina moved out of it, and just dragged it out there. And he wasn't allowed to live that way on his land because of zoning or some shit. So he just basically hid it in the woods. So if they don't see it, they don't know. And you could see a lot of uncomfortable shifting, looking for the door. Can I get out of here with no one? Because they didn't want to hear. They didn't want to hear that. They wanted to hear, how do I keep playing Xbox and have a 50-acre farm and make my living selling grass-fed beef? Because that's what the guy in California was doing. He was selling as fast as he could produce beef, pork, and chicken. He was selling it. And he literally he's like, I am not here to get business. I can't take any new customers. I am tapped out. I don't want to work any harder. My land is paid for. But then nobody actually, I would say nobody. You could tell a lot of people were uncomfortable hearing what it took to get that. And I'm sure there'll be somebody in 10 years that'll tell you how lucky you are. I promise you, they will tell you how, just as you're really lucky.
Yeah. No, like I didn't shiver in the cold and the wet, dealing with mold and all the rest. Yeah, no, it's there are a lot of even people it kind of blows my mind. There are people my age that like play Minecraft. I'm out here with a real pickaxe and I'm really building stuff, and it's interesting. I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Well, hey man, I appreciate you being with us today. Again, I'm going to make sure that that his YouTube, Instagram, Telegram are all in the audio notes. That will go live on the audio side about 30 to 45 minutes from when this video ends. There's a link right down in the video notes if you're watching the video for that. And if you click it right now, then you're going to send me a DM or something. It tells me it's broken. It's not broken. It's not there yet. We're not done yet. It will be there soon. I got a couple yesterday on Nostr from DMs like the link doesn't work. Well, it's been 2 minutes since the live stream stopped. It's not done yet. So just so you guys know that. And if you are listening to the audio and you want to follow everything, then what you really want to do is just go to the site, thesurvivalpodcast.com, and pull up episode 3321. If it's today, it'll be at the top. If it's somewhere in the future you found this episode, just use the search box and put 3321 in the search box and you will find this episode. Man, I really appreciate you being with us today. This was a great discussion, and I hope it'll encourage people. One of your stated objectives was to remove excuses for people not doing this when you submitted to be on the show. I don't know if you've removed the excuses from the stubborn, but you've done a good job of removing the excuses from the person that doesn't want an excuse. They're looking for a way around it. There is a way to do this.
Like I wouldn't recommend this life to everybody, but for those that want it, it's like, how bad do you want it? Like, do you really want it? Because if you do, you can make it happen. Like really, like it depends where you are in your own situation, but there's always a way.
I want to bust a myth for people that are young that think this will be easier when they're 40. It won't. If you're 20 years old and single, it will never be easier than it will be in the next few months to years. Like you may want to do what Kyle did, and you may want to save up some money or what have you. But like then you don't say, well, one day I'm going to save up some money. I'm going to do it. Then the day to start saving is today. The day to come up with a plan, a budget, etc. The day to start window shopping land, start learning what's available, and then understand something you really have going for you when you're that young. It doesn't matter where you move to. Now, you may have family you want to stay within a day's drive or something, like to go home and visit mom or whatever. But like when we moved here, part of what made it hard is we were coming back from Arkansas. My father-in-law was in poor health. My wife wanted to be here to help take care of him. So we drew a circle around him. And we had to be within a certain, like she had to be any day, be there that morning if she needed to be there. And so that limited, and it was still a big geography. But when I was 20, it would have been 22 because I had to get out of the Army. But at that point, I literally did go wherever there was an opportunity. And when you're looking for land, the opportunity is here's a place that I can afford that'll work. And don't be afraid. Yeah. And especially in our country, like Ireland it's not small, but compared to the United States, there's a lot less real estate available. There is so much available in this country in every climate type. South Florida is tropics.
When picking a property, I've talked about this on my channel before, is the perfect property is the one that you're willing to compromise for. And it goes with everything in life, really, relationships, everything. It's just like you need to be willing to compromise somewhat.
Yeah. Oh, I never asked you, like, where is your property from Dublin, and how much property do you have?
I have an acre, but it's bordering with Sitka spruce forestry plantation. So there's like a couple hundred acres of. So I'm very. I think my nearest neighbor is like 100 to 2. No. Yeah, maybe 200 meters away from me. So I'm very on my own here, which is nice.
That's a perfect setup because you're only paying for the acre. You're only paying tax on the acre. Acre will wear you out, and then you have the buffer. If I owned 100 acres, I'd probably clear 2 at the most.
Yeah. But I like having that buffer. I like walking the dog back there. It's kind of like I treat it like it's my own forest, you know.
Yeah.
But I can't cut down firewood for all the trees. I'll just say that.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you being with us today. Again, we'll get this up about a half hour to 45 minutes from right now. Thanks for being with us today, Kyle.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
All right, guys, real quick before I completely wrap up and go get on that editing, want to remind you that you can help support this show by doing your online shopping at tspaz.com. That's TSPAZ, tspaz.com. When you shop there, no matter what you buy, you do help us out. Today's item of the day, I won't say much about because I brought it around last week for you. But I brought it back today because so many of you actually got your hands on it. It is the Vegetti Spiral Vegetable Slicer. They're $10, and they don't take up a lot of space like a spiralizer does. And if you're living the low-carb lifestyle, that's just a great tool to be able to make zoodles, which are just vegetable noodles. I even have a little video for you showing how to use it. It's only about a minute long. Honestly, if you can't figure out how to use it, you probably shouldn't have it. It's pretty simple. It's like a pencil sharpener in the way that it works. But I did the video more to show you how well it works because it does work really good. And if you are growing the tromboncino zucchinis that I talk about all the time, this thing is awesome because that whole neck is just flesh. So it is very, very easy to use, works very quickly. Check it out. But I think we've sold somewhere north of 100 of these since I brought it around last week. I've got at least a dozen, thank you, this thing's awesome emails and 0 complaints. So that's always a good thing. And then real quick reminder, I do still have a few tickets left for our 15-year anniversary celebration. It's going to be located in Fort Worth, Texas. It is a Thursday. The date is the 20th of July. I think when I looked this morning, there were 8 tickets left for it. If you can come, it will be a hell of a party. You'll meet some really great people. And I really encourage you, if you want to come and you want to get a ticket, I would get a ticket now because when we're talking single digits, one person could pick up a couple here and there because I've had a lot of couples coming and they could go really quick. But, that said, anybody that wanted to come, you've had, 2 weeks now. So, but if you still want to come, get on board before it's too late. With that, I hope you had a good time today. Again, it was really a great guest. I love having folks on like Kyle that are making it happen. And I like having people on like they've gotten some things done. So it's not just an idea. It's not just something that they're pulling out of their rear end, but yet they're still very early in it because that shows you the progression because there is a lot of, I don't want to call it fake on YouTube, but there's a lot of people out there that are doing this and they do have a lot of resources and money, or maybe they didn't in the beginning and they had to fight through this, but now they've got all the systems set up. They're in a very mature system and they've got good income coming in from what they're doing. And it makes it look really easy, which is a problem because it's not, especially in the beginning, but it also sometimes makes it look out of reach. This is not out of reach. And again, you young folks, you 20 somethings, get on with it. Get on with it because your dash is shortening every day. With that, it's been Jack Spirko with another edition of the Survival Podcast.